Have you ever caught yourself reacting in a way you promised you wouldn't anymore? Maybe you lose patience faster than you intended, fall back into an old habit, or feel stress rise before you even understand why. Afterwards, you think, I know better than this. So why does it keep happening? It raises an interesting question. How much of our behavior is actually a conscious choice? And how much of it is simply the brain repeating patterns it has learned over time? Welcome to the Jade Dragon Podcast. This is where we explore the meeting point between science, health, and personal development, always grounded in physiology rather than hype. I'm your host, David Hastings Lloyd. Today, we're talking about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change itself, and what modern neuroscience tells us about habit, emotion, and long-term change. For a long time, people believed the brain became mostly fixed once adulthood was reached. Personality was personality. Habits were habits. You could improve a little, maybe learn new information, but deep change was thought to be unlikely. What neuroscience now shows is something quite different. The brain remains adaptable throughout life. It is constantly reorganizing itself based on what we repeatedly do, think, and experience. The brain works through enormous networks of nerve cells, communicating through electrical signals and chemical messengers. Thinking doesn't happen in one single location. Memory, emotion, attention, and movement all involve multiple regions activating together. Every experience leaves activity patterns behind. And when those patterns repeat, the connections between neurons strengthen. In simple terms, the brain becomes efficient at whatever it practices most often. That's why learning anything new feels awkward in the beginning. When you first develop a skill, whether it's learning a language, practicing meditation, or even changing how you respond emotionally, it requires effort and attention. You have to think about what you're doing. Mistakes happen easily. Progress feels slow. But repetition changes the system. With enough practice, control gradually shifts away from conscious effort toward automatic processing. The brain hands the task off to deeper systems that manage behavior efficiently. Think about driving. At one time, every movement required attention. Now you can drive familiar roads while holding a conversation or reflecting on your day. The skill didn't just become easier psychologically. The brain physically reorganized itself to make that behavior automatic. Habit is not simply willpower repeated. Habit is neural wiring stabilized through repetition. For decades, scientists argued about whether behavior comes mainly from genetics or from experience. The answer turns out to be both working together all the time. We are born with organized neural systems already in place. The brain isn't empty at birth, but experience determines which pathways strengthen and which fade away. Your relationships, stress levels, education, movement habits, and emotional experiences all influence how neural circuits develop across life. Genetics sets the starting conditions. Experience determines which patterns become dominant. This ability of the brain to reorganize itself is called neuroplasticity. Neural circuits strengthen when they are used repeatedly and weaken when they are not. And importantly, this doesn't stop when childhood ends. Adult brains remain capable of adaptation. Learning and behavioral change continue to produce measurable biological effects. One of the clearest examples of this process shows up in stress. The human nervous system evolved to react quickly to danger. When threatened, the body increases alertness, heart rate, and attention. In the right situation, this response is useful. It keeps us alive, but the brain learns from repetition, not intention. If stress responses activate day after day, the nervous system begins to treat that state as normal. Neural pathways linked to vigilance and reactivity strengthen. Eventually, the body prepares for threat, even when none is present. Many people experience this as chronic anxiety or tension, but from a biological perspective, the brain has simply learned efficiency in survival mode. Emotions follow the same rule. When certain emotional reactions occur repeatedly, the brain becomes faster at producing them. Over time, reactions may arise before conscious thought has time to intervene. What feels like personality can often reflect learned neural patterns reinforced through years of repetition. So, where does change begin? A key player here is the frontal lobe, the part of the brain involved in planning, reflection, and imagining future outcomes. This region allows us to act according to intention rather than immediate impulse. When attention stays focused on a chosen direction, frontal brain systems can interrupt automatic emotional responses and support new behavioral patterns. In other words, attention creates opportunity. Repetition creates change. There's another interesting finding here. The brain responds not only to action, but also to imagination. Mental rehearsal activates many of the same neural circuits involved in physical performance. Athletes have used visualization for decades because imagining movement recruits the same networks needed to perform it. Mental practice alone isn't enough, but it prepares the nervous system. The brain begins organizing itself before behavior visibly changes. Over time, repeated experiences stabilize neural activity. Single events come and go, but repetition builds lasting structure. Habits form when neural efficiency replaces conscious effort. The brain becomes skilled at whatever patterns occur most frequently, whether those patterns are helpful or limiting. This shifts how we think about personal growth. Understanding something intellectually rarely produces lasting change. The brain responds to experience. Attention directs activation. Practice strengthens circuits. Emotional engagement reinforces learning. New behaviors must be repeated long enough to compete with existing neural pathways. Change happens gradually as new patterns gain stability and begin to replace older defaults. So, the larger takeaway from this research is straightforward. The brain is not simply a record of who you have been. It is an adaptive system responding continuously to how you live right now. Every repeated action strengthens something. Every sustained practice reshapes neural organization. Change is rarely sudden, but biologically, it remains possible for as long as the brain continues to learn. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can visit www.jadedragon.online for research-based articles, courses, and deeper discussions on Qigong, neuroscience, and health. And if this conversation resonated with you, subscribe to the Jade Dragon Podcast and share this episode with someone curious about the science behind real change.